Yo, so this will kind of be like a little discussion recap on just my experience going into season one because I kind of came in right at the end of season one, and I mean, usually whenever I do come back to World of Warcraft, I always end up like showing up right at the end of an expansion or like the last few seasons before like everything kind of just settles out and people are just really catching up with all the content that is in the game so far. So this is kind of like a rare occasion where I actually started playing World of Warcraft at pretty much the beginning of an expansion. I did do that with Shadowlands though, and Battle for Azeroth. I actually was there for the beginning, but then I would end up like quitting or leaving after like a month or two. It's very hard to like get back into WoW when you're so used to like community engagement and interacting with people, especially from like private servers. And I think that's why a lot of people gravitate towards private servers if they do want to play World of Warcraft again in some kind of sense. Obviously, you know, we have legacy servers, so that kind of spread more people out in the World of Warcraft scene. Like, you have people still on private servers, you have people only having a subscription for the legacy servers, and then you have the retail current expansion players. I haven't really done like crazy PvP. I do want to get back into it. For now, I'm mainly focused on trying to have pretty much top end mythic dungeon gear. Usually what I do is I'll gear up as far as I can on mythic level dungeons, and once my average item level is pretty much what would be top or near top for that current season, I'll start to, you know, do some PvP, grind out PvP gear, get some gladiator raiding going, maybe even finding like a 2v2 partner. But usually I always do mythics first. And on to the topic of like other content like delves. I actually really like delves. I like it better than like some of the previous instances that was unique to each expansion, kind of like Shadowlands had Torghast. Torghast was cool, but I don't know. For some reason, like basically cave mining in delves just seems more simpler. It has a more linear path that's not too long. And I don't know, it also feels a little more rewarding. Completing delve missions feels way more rewarding, and it's another good way to gear up. But with that same token, you have kind of a negative highlight on it for some people, is that they're creating even more content where you don't really need other people to gear up. I mean, if you really wanted to, I'm sure there are people who only geared up by doing delves. Once they get, like, you know, certain keys to get open the coffins at the end of each delve to really get some piece of loot. I've seen, like, a few groups listed for delve missions, but most of the time people just solo them. But kind of coming back into War Within, I'm noticing that a lot of... They don't seem to be, like, itching away from making things difficult to a point where you need people. It feels like they're itching away from that even more in terms of like what I'm seeing with delve. The only thing that you need people for, at least in War Within, to gear up is raiding and mythic dungeons. Everything else you pretty much can do on your own, unless it's like a really hard world boss and you need to like go on, you know, group finder and jump into whatever party leader's server they're on, or create your own server and do a bunch of world bosses for your weekly quests. I'd say like the feeling that I usually get with each expansion that ends up leading me to quit, I'd probably say that feeling still exists. Like, I'm not gonna deny that. It definitely exists. Like, I even right now, like, I'm having moments where like, oh man, I should just like not do it. I should just, you know, maybe go back to a private server or do something else, you know, play a different game or start up a new series on my channel. And I think, honestly, what always brings me to these moments where I'm, like, debating on whether or not I should quit is just how silent everything feels. Like, you really don't realize it, but World of Warcraft, what made it so great was the community. And I've talked about that in my other videos when leveling. Like, you really don't want to underestimate how much power and motivation that can give players to stay playing on a game is the community engagement. And it's just like, it's almost like Blizzard is just like has accepted the fact that a lot of people nowadays just don't want to interact with each other. They, just let people be able to do their own thing. And it's a double-edged sword, because like, just as you pick up more responsibilities in life, like, a lot of people, especially people who originally founded World of Warcraft and were playing since the beginning, a lot of people are older, they don't have a lot of time like they used to. So I get that, like, oh, there should be content where you don't have to worry about missing out on content because, like, your guild is already ahead of you, and that you're not going to be able to do any runs on your own with that. Like, almost like you need people to gear up. And I get that too. It was a double-edged sword back then. Like, you're basically not going further at all in content if you're not working with people. Nowadays, like, you can do pretty well for yourself with some of the stuff that's out here now, with like the world quests, delve missions, even the weekly rewards. Like, you get heroic level gear of the current season raid just by doing the weekend rewards. So, like, really anybody can come back into WoW and kind of gear up and be on a similar level as people who've invested a lot of time in the game, which is good. But again, as I've already said earlier, this really cuts down on player interaction, like the need to work with other players. But without even looking at any statistics or charts, I do feel like, though, there feels to be like more population in the game. And sometimes I am, like, finding myself interacting with people, especially with, like, doing the campaigns for, being max level. Like, I've noticed that I've actually needed to, like, interact with people to do some of these quests, like, because you really want to blast through it, you should quest up with people. So I noticed, like, the difficulty in, like, the mobs and killing enemies, I noticed that has increased, because I don't remember it being like that before. Like, I remember having, like, the basic level of max level gear, and, like, I could just solo anything pretty much, as, like, on my enhancement shaman. Like, I could just solo anything, it didn't matter. Like, I almost barely needed anybody back in, like, Legion, Battle for Azeroth, Shadowlands. Like, I basically did not need anybody. But I noticed leveling and doing max level content quests or world quests that you actually need a decent amount of help, besides, like, the simple, oh, kill this many enemies, or, collection item type quests. I also noticed that with the world quests, I don't feel too overwhelmed by them like in previous expansions. And I don't know if it's just because I see it differently now, or they actually did make a change. No. Because I don't really read any patch notes much. I don't read, up-to-date changes with the game unless there is something I'm looking for. So this is all based off of feel. This is, some of the experiences I'm describing is based off of, like, what I think has changed and how I feel when leveling and when doing max level content. So if I'm on the ball with certain things, then, that's a pretty genuine, experience that I have. And if I say something that's kind of like, oh, well, that's actually not really true, then, I mean, that's fine too. I'm not stating that all my experiences and the things that I think have changed specifically is fact. It's more so just how I feel about it in that moment. But yeah, where I was going with that is, I don't really feel like there's a clutter of world quests. I do feel like in the previous expansions that there was like an endless stream of world quests. Almost like redundancy of world quests. I don't really feel that way with these new zones. And I could be wrong. Maybe they've been putting out the same amount of world quests per zone, just like in Shadowlands. I really could be wrong. But it doesn't feel that way. And I actually kind of like that. But I never really had an issue with world quests other than some of them being redundant and like a little overwhelming. I actually do like the concepts of world quests. But I also can say with a certainty that I enjoyed very much the new zones in this expansion. I mean, as I said earlier, Hollowfall is like my favorite zone. Obviously, Dornegal is like the capital of the island. It's like the new capital that everyone hangs out in, pretty much. With some of my Mythic Dungeon experiences, which probably my most favorite thing to do in retail WoW. I really love the concept of Mythic Dungeons. Without going into it too deeply, it's a really good way to gear up. Similarly to, you know, raid gear or players who are raiding, because you have these groups of people. You have people who gear up from doing other instances like delves. Then you have people who gear up from time walking. You have people who gear up by doing mythic dungeons, which is its own competition, its own ranking and leaderboards. And then you have people running raids. My most favorite is Mythics. I think Mythic Dungeons is a really good balance between doing current content, but also getting gear very quickly. Because if you're smart about how you do your Mythic runs and how you set up your squad of members to do your keystones, you can gear up very quickly. And then, of course, if you have plenty of Valor Stones, which is used to upgrade your gear for that current season, you can get even higher, average item level just by farming Valor Stones, farming new gear, and then upgrading that new gear to the max level upgrade out of 8 that you can do. I totally would be more into raiding. Even in my previous expansion experiences, I never really found the chance to do a lot of raiding. That's one thing that I've missed out on every single time that I've come back to this expansion. Every single time I've come back to retail WoW is the fact that it feels like a piece of work to find a guild that can successfully do raids and that are willing to take on new people. And again, that just goes back to, putting in the effort to make sure that you're engaging with other people. And the same needs to be said for others. Those people that you're trying to engage with are also hopefully going to engage with you and communicate with you efficiently. I just have a really hard time finding that guild that is open and interactive with everyone who joins, but not too overly populated and cluttered to the point where it's just like you're just another number in the guild. And that it's basically just everything is just first come, first serve. Whether they are doing raids, like the really big guilds who just, invite anybody and everybody, I feel like those are like first come, first serve. Like if you sign up and you show up, you're going to get it. They don't care about who you are, really. They don't care about maybe even your experiences, as long as you show up and you can understand the basic mechanics and you're probably not a jerk. I guess they would take you. I mean, that's my guess. I wouldn't really know though, because I haven't gotten the chance to raid. I mean, I think I did like one boss or like half a raid in Shadowlands on my enhancement shaman. I did join a guild and I did try to raid. I think it was on normal, just not raid finder, but just an actual guild run of normal. I forgot what raid it was. We did like 1 or 2 bosses and it was cool, but I wasn't able to, you know, fully execute that plan because, of course, I ended up just quitting retail back then. I'm really hoping that I can make something work with the current guild that I'm with. I'm not really too confident about that guild because I just, you know, when I was leveling almost to level 80, I was invited to the guild called Old Gods, which is like a realm-wide guild. They seem to be pretty acceptant of new people, and I think, you know, everyone seems to be pleasant enough. I mean, I may or may not continue to raid with them, or not continue. I may or may not raid with them because I think they are doing raids in Mythics. I know in Season 1 everything was just kind of me catching up, me getting ready for Season 2 basically, because I ended up finding out kind of the hard way that by the time I ended up getting a bunch of good Season 1 gear, I didn't realize that you couldn't upgrade Season 1 gear. If Season 2 is out, you can't upgrade Season 1 gear. So right near the end, I had geared up so much. Like, within a week, I got a lot of good Season 1 gear, and I couldn't upgrade any of it when that new patch release came out. And I was like, damn, just as I was starting to really gear up, oh, Season 2 is out, and all the previous season gear you cannot upgrade. Might as well sell it or disenchant it. I think it makes sense though, because you need, like, the game wants you to have relevant gear. Like, you can't get carried by the previous, you know, season gear or tier into the next one, because they want you to continue to grind. It makes sense. They want to encourage more player activity. Oh, new season, okay, new gear and new upgrades that you have to do. And because of those upgrades, that requires you to farm Valor Stones. And to get Valor Stones, you have to do world quests. You have to do just general quests. If you haven't done campaign quests is a great way to get Valor Stones. And then dailies. So this whole cycle of the way that they handle seasons and gear, it's all supposed to make you go out and do the content. And that stuff I like, because it forces you. I think the only way you could probably avoid it is if you just hard log raids, or you have good rating for mythics and you're able to just spam mythics all day. But even then though, you still have to upgrade your gear. So unless you don't care about upgrading your gear and you just want to keep it at what, you know, what level you received the item when you won it, I mean, unless you don't care about upgrading it, I guess you can just wait for the next best average item level of the next item that you get. But who really does that? I mean, just probably people who don't care about upgrading. It's funny though, because upgrading, you know, gear has been around for a while, but for some reason in this expansion, upgrading gear just seems to be easier to understand. Like, there's not complex, there's not like a huge complexity to it, and I really like that. Like, you just go to the merchant and you slap your item on there, and if you have enough Valor Stones, okay, there you go, it's upgraded. And then you have to get, you know, crests and stuff, but that's for more of the higher end pieces of gear that you're trying to upgrade. And since we're on the topic of gear, there is one thing that I've always felt, and now I have the chance to kind of bring it up and talk about it, is I feel like stats don't really seem to be that important. I always felt like people only care about your item level. They do not care about what kind of gear you have, what kind of stats you could have. If your item level is high, people just take you. I've never really came across a group of people who are like, oh, you have that kind of gear on. Like if you're full purple and you have mythic level gear, it doesn't even matter what stats are on it. You could have like the worst trinket that was won by like some healer, and you're a DPS, and you're like, oh, healer, do you need that trinket? I mean, I'll take it just because it has a higher item level. So they basically take this healer trinket, and they just take it to boost their item level so they can get into dungeons easier, because, you know, most people aren't really going to bother looking at what you're wearing. The only thing they're looking at is, you know, if you've done the Shaohao Mountain, you know, the training grounds or whatever, the Pandarian training grounds, like the bronze, silver, and gold damage, if you do those. So they're looking at if you have gold damage for your ratings. They're looking at your mythic ratings if you have any. And then they're looking at your item level. So they're looking at your training grounds level, metal, your training ground training. They're looking to see if you're gold in your role for training grounds. They're looking at your item level, and then they're looking at your mythic rating. And I feel like that's all people care about. But besides like just that being what people care about, what I'm also concerned is that, do stats really matter that much? I feel like with a lot of specs and classes for people, there's not a lot of engagement with the gear that you get. You know, you get a piece of gear, and honestly, I'm sure what most people do is they just look at what the item level is before they look at anything else. The only type of engagement I ever get with stats is when I get trinkets. That's the only time I'm really looking at, oh, what does this piece of, you know, equipment do, or what do I get from it? You know, what's the real gain is the trinkets. Of course, no matter what the case may be, there's always going to be a best in slot, and there's best in slot lists online that you can look up for your class and spec, and you can grind out for those pieces of gear if you really care about all that and you want to min-max your stats and all your gear. But I feel like for the majority of people, they just pick up the highest item level that is possible for them, and then they just roll with that. But getting gear is, of course, like one of the most important things in the entire point of World of Warcraft is getting gear, grinding out gear, building your character. That's the most important thing. That's why we play this game. It's to have fun and have an overpowered character. Everyone wishes for that. So with that in mind, gear is really important, and I don't like how there's just not a lot of care in the world for the gear that drops. It's just like, oh, it's a high item level, so I'll just take it. It's just like, really? Is that really the range of how much people can enjoy gear? Is just the item level? And some of the gear design, like, it's not as good as it used to be back in the previous expansions. So instead of like actually putting good effort in making, you know, unique and original gear, they just they just have transmog basically do all the work for them. And if you just mix match what kind of gear you want to have using older content gear and then transmogging it to make a badass look. Though I will say some of the raid sets that I've seen actually do look pretty cool. Some of them do look like they're just like a remastered, like remake version of an older set. Sometimes they just look like a recolored version of an older set. But I really do dislike how item level is like the most important thing. I feel like the only time item level might not have a huge impact is, if I had to guess, it would probably be when you have high-end raid gear and you have the luxury and time to where you can farm best in slot pieces of loot. But I feel like that's only worth trying when you get to that point. And I wouldn't say a high majority of people get to that point. So the lack of interest and engagement with pieces of gear other than what the item level is, that's always bothered me, because I just thought stats mattered. But stats don't feel like they matter. Whatever drops for you is basically all the work is done for the unique role loots for each person, or drop loot, whatever. Everyone, the game automatically will say, okay, your current spec is, outlaw rogue. Okay, So your loot table is Outlaw Rogue, and so whatever is good for your spec and class will drop for you most of the time. So you're just not really, I just feel like it just doesn't allow you to really think about, okay, this dungeon drops this kind of gear and this dungeon drops this kind of gear, so I'm going to farm these dungeons. I feel like a lot of people don't really care about that, besides the small majority of people who are trying to really hit that best in slot list. But even then, I don't think, like, I just feel like the results of doing best in slot demonstrates a major difference in, you know, in whatever role you're doing, the output of it. So like damage, healing, or tanking. But, you know, I'm more specifically talking about doing damage. I don't know, someone who has the highest item level of gear that drops from their loot table compared to someone who probably has a decent bit of best in slot gear, they're probably doing around the same amount of damage, right? I mean, I can't imagine it's that drastic where the person with best in slot is running laps around the person who just has that average loot table drop with their spec, and they're not really paying much mind to what's considered best in slot. Only what has a high item level and drops for their spec and class. I feel like they're both kind of probably performing close. I mean, I'm sure best in slot will still do more output compared to someone who's not really considering it or thinking about it much, but still, I feel like, is it really worth all that energy? If that's the case? But anyone who knows more about that, I mean, please tell me if I'm wrong. Like, no, like, if you get best in slot, if you follow your list of what's considered best in slot for your class and spec, and it really does show, like, a huge difference in output of damage or whatever your role is, then, I mean, hell, like, I'll definitely consider it more and look into it. But from what I've experienced and what I've seen, that doesn't seem to be the case. And I don't think people give a crap about it either. I don't think, you know, you're going to have players who look at you and be like, oh my god, you have, like, the best available gear for you right now, or you have the best trinket. I just feel like people don't care. But I've been enjoying Season 1 so far. You know, now we're on to Season 2. The campaigns are actually interesting. It's the only time where I've actually given a crap about doing campaigns. I still have to do a lot of the original campaigns for the expansion of each faction, because I kind of just sped run to do what was current for the season, and I didn't really have a lot of time to go back and, you know, finish some of the older or original campaigns. So I really want to get that done. Now that the Undermine Season 2 patch is out, people can continue questing in Undermine to finish the campaign, so I need to do that and finish it. Right now I'm on chapter 4, and I have 2 more chapters to go to finish Undermine. But all of the campaigns from Season 1, they need to be finished, and I also need to increase my renown with those factions. So I need to put in some more work for, like, world quests and just specific faction quests to really get up there. So I still have a lot of work to do. But when you join World of Warcraft, you know, the current expansion at earlier in the expansion, it definitely doesn't feel as overwhelming. And that's what I like. I always end up, you know, usually I always end up coming back at the end of each expansion, and I am extremely overwhelmed with what's out. And I have to, like, catch up on everything. Like, if I thought it was bad now, joining at the end of an expansion is, like, the worst thing that you can do. Because it just feels so overwhelming. But yeah, that's kind of my experience so far. I haven't lost motivation yet, and I'm really trying to stick it out as much as possible. I think once I'm able to feel more comfortable just kind of doing some PvP, I think I won't feel as, like, bored or kind of lost. I don't know how to describe the feeling. I guess the closest thing I could describe is sometimes it can feel a little empty. Like there's so, and it's so ironic too, because it's like, oh, there's so much to do. Even besides current expansion stuff, you can do achievement hunting, you can do, you know, mount runs, transmog runs, you know, pet battles. There's a lot you can do. And yet, in the midst of all of that, and I'm sure this feeling for a lot of, you know, longtime WoW players, or even current WoW players who are a little newer to the MMO, is in the midst of all that, there still seems to be this empty feeling that sticks with you for a little bit. And it's hard to shake that. And maybe I would feel differently once I'm able to interact with a guild, and the world won't feel so big. It'll kind of shrink up a little bit down to the people that, you know, you've engaged with. So, although, you know, I really like smaller community guilds. I don't typically like realm-wide huge guilds. I like smaller community and populated guilds. I feel like you get a more meaningful connection and interaction with the players, other than being just another number that signs up for whatever calendar event is currently on, you know, on for the month. But so far, it's been an interesting experience. I've had a few little surprises, and I do feel a little more impressed with this current expansion in comparison to the others. And I still have moments where I'm like, hey, like, I really want to log in and do some WoW. It's been a long time since I've really felt that way. Usually I only feel that for like private servers. So the fact that I am getting that same feeling for retail WoW, despite everything that has changed in comparison to their older expansions, is actually a really good sign. Again, though, as I was just saying, I still have some moments where I'm like, I just want to quit. That could just be out of habit, out of the fact that I'm afraid, you know, it's just going to go down the crapper and that people really don't care and blah, blah, blah. But no, like, I every day I always think about, maybe I'll log in and play for a bit. Maybe I'll do some mythics. Maybe I'll do some more mount runs that I missed, or maybe even some PvP. So, or even just doing campaigns. So there's a lot that I'm still able to do and not feel so bored, and I'm going to do some more work to try and like engage with maybe a more smaller community guild if the current one that I'm in doesn't really work out, because I haven't even done a mythic dungeon with these people yet. I am in the Discord, but I don't really think I care too much about everything they got going on. So I honestly, I'm still figuring it out. It's still very early in the expansion. I think everyone's kind of trying to figure it out. And just as I was starting to catch up, you know, they release Undermine, and there's this whole new zone right after I discovered Siren Islands. And it's like, damn, okay. Now I gotta do Undermine and catch up with the current, you know, stuff that's going on over there with the new zone. And Siren Islands is basically, you know, void, because Undermine is better and it's current. So yeah, so far so good. I'm still having fun. Things do feel balanced, and there's plenty of pros and cons, but definitely more pros this time for how the expansion's looking in the seasons. So I hope Blizzard can keep it up, and that I stay happy with what's out right now. But yeah, see you guys in the next one.